The world was ablaze, and the scent of death was the only thing remaining on the horizon. It was not merely a battle. It was the brutal clash of two civilizations where steel met faith on the field of Ebenezer. 30,000 men of Israel fell in a single day, leaving the earth soaked in blood and the air saturated with the metallic odor of sliced flesh and the sulfur of Philistine torches. The silence that followed was not one of peace, but of absolute terror. The Philistines had committed the unthinkable. They did not just win the war, they stole the heart of a nation. Amidst the screams of agony and the black smoke of burning villages, the generals of Gaza and Ashdod raised the Ark of the Covenant like a war trophy. They believed they had captured the very God of their enemies, unaware that they had just invited their own annihilation. The triumphal procession entered Ashdod under a rain of petals and war cries that made the walls tremble. The fate of the artifact had been decided by the high priests in an act of supreme arrogance. The Ark would be placed inside the temple of Dagon, the fish god, lord of the waters and the harvest. The gesture was laden with violent political and spiritual symbolism. Placing the Ark at the feet of the colossal statue of Dagon meant that the God of Israel was now a vassal, a spiritual slave subjugated by the strength of Philistine bronze. That night, as the heavy cedar doors of the temple swung shut, sealing the two gods in darkness, a shiver ran through the city. The atmosphere was charged with an oppressive spiritual electricity, as if the very air were under unbearable pressure, about to explode under the weight of a holiness that the pagan temple could not contain. The break in normality came with the first ray of light the following morning, and it was a blow to the gut of the entire nation. When the priests opened the temple doors, a cry of horror echoed through the marble colonnades. Dagon, the imposing, the unshakable lord of Philistia, had fallen. His statue of stone and gold lay face down on the ground, prostrated in a gesture of absolute worship before the Ark of wood and gold. There were no signs of a break-in, no marks of ropes or levers. With trembling hands, the priests lifted the image and fastened it back to its pedestal, whispering prayers of atonement, convinced that an isolated tremor had occurred during the night. But the phenomenon escalated into the macabre the following night. At dawn, the scene was one of merciless divine judgment. Dagon had fallen again, but this time, his head and hands had been severed and lay upon the threshold of the door, as if cut by an invisible blade of pure light. Only the lifeless torso remained. It became clear that the victory at Ebenezer had been the trigger for something far more dangerous than a war between armies of flesh and blood. Cold sweat began to pour down the faces of the generals who had once laughed. The first clues of the catastrophe did not come from the sky, but from the bowels of the earth. The granaries of Ashdod were invaded by a horde of thousands of red-eyed rats emerging from the cracks, devouring the family's sustenance at an impossible speed. And then, the horror manifested in the flesh itself. Small swellings, painful, black, and festering tumors, began to appear on the skin of the inhabitants. What began as an irritation became an agony that did not distinguish between beggar and prince. The central question in the streets was no longer who won the war, but rather who will survive this sacred guest. In an act of cowardly desperation, the rulers decided that the Ark did not belong in Ashdod and that the plague was merely a matter of geographical bad luck. They sent it to Gath, a city of giants and formidable warriors who laughed at the news. But wherever the caravan passed, the glint of the Ark's gold seemed to suck the sunlight away, making the day colder and grayer. In Gath, the cycle of death repeated with even greater ferocity. The giants, known for their brute strength, doubled over in agony under the weight of the same plagues, crying out for mercy to gods who did not answer. They sought a medical solution for an invasion of pure holiness. The tension reached a breaking point when the Ark arrived in Ekron. Seeing the object approach the gates, the citizens fell into total panic, crying out, "They have brought the Ark of the God of Israel to exterminate us." The economy of Philistia had collapsed. The defense system no longer existed. After 7 months of uninterrupted agony, the Philistine leaders reached the inevitable conclusion. The Ark was not an object of power that one could possess. It was a throne that demanded to be returned. They understood they were trying to domesticate the creator of the universe. They summoned diviners and proposed a plan that defied military logic and animal instinct. They ordered the construction of a new cart made of virgin wood and chose 2 cows that had just given birth and had never worn a yoke. The test was brutal in its simplicity. If these cows abandoned their calves, who were crying out from hunger, and walked alone toward the lands of Israel, they would know the punishment had come from the hand of God. If they returned to their young, it was merely chance. The final confrontation took place on a morning of low mist on the dusty road leading to Beth Shemesh. The Philistine soldiers, covered in foul-smelling bandages and with eyes hollowed by pain, watched from a distance with bated breath. The cows were hitched to the cart. Their calves were locked in a nearby pen, and their desperate cries for milk filled the air, piercing the morning silence. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. It was the most basic instinct of nature against the absolute will of the eternal. Then, the impossible happened. Without any human guide, without whips or reins, the cows began to walk. They lowed with longing for their young, but their feet followed a straight and unshakable line. They did not look back. They were following the road of glory. That moment revealed the entire truth hidden in the 7 months of chaos. The severed statues, the infestation of rats, the devouring tumors. It was all the echo of a deity who refused to be a prisoner. The ark entered Israeli territory, and the jubilation of the reapers of Beth Shemesh in the distance sounded like a thunder of joy that shook the ground. The Philistines returned to their desolate cities, carrying the weight of a defeat that no sword could avenge. They had tried to capture the light, and they ended up consumed by it. The marks left on the earth and on the skin of that people served as an eternal reminder that there are mysteries that must not be challenged. Philistia had learned history's bloodiest lesson. Israel's army could be defeated, but the God of Israel was ungovernable. On the horizon, the sun set, and the silence that now covered the Philistine cities was no longer one of triumph, but of a deep and reverent fear. Under the weight of glory, even the earth trembles and time bows to the will of the Lord.